This is Undaunted.Life, a man's podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Thompson. Let's get into it. All right, guys, today I've got a special guest on the podcast. His name is Chad Prather. So he is a comedian, conservative, political commentator, and the host of the Chad Prather Show on BlazeTV. I actually appeared on his show back in June. I think it was June, I believe. So you can go to our website and check that out, or just go to his YouTube channel. We did 2 back-to-back episodes, so that was a lot of fun. This guy has done a lot of things in his life, and we get into that in the show. He actually ran for governor of the state of Texas here recently. But here's the thing about this podcast, and I've told you guys this before. Some of my favorite interviews that I've ever done, whenever I go back and look at the questions I intended to ask them and compare it to the questions that I actually ended up asking them, they're completely different. That is a common through point of some of my favorite interviews that I've ever done. And this conversation is no different, because I've got a lot of things on my list that we didn't cover, even a little bit. Okay, all right, we talk a little bit about, the different things he's done in his life, because he's had a lot of different jobs and a lot of different areas of focus. And, he had a very circuitous route to being a comedian and a professional conservative podcaster with the Blaze and all these different things. But almost immediately, I started talking to him about the state of the church and the state of how church is done today versus the first century or New Testament model. We spent a great deal of time talking about that. But then we talked about the state of manhood, not just in the church, but in culture at large. And then we get into some of the drag queen story hour and drag queen parties that are happening around. And guys, I don't really want to go into any more detail because I want you to get into this. This was a fantastic conversation. Now, I'm going to have Chad back on. I don't know if we'll be able to get him on before the end of the year, maybe beginning of next year, and we'll deal with some of that. I do want to talk to him about what it was like running for governor of the state of Texas. I do want to talk to him about his thoughts on the future of the country, and I want him to go over stuff that's in the news cycle, what he thinks about Biden, what he thinks about Trump, all that kind of stuff. But that's just not where we went. About 20, 25 minutes in, I was like, nope, all right, we're blowing this up, and we're going to move through it. So I really, really do think you guys are going to enjoy that. And I also know that you guys love delicious, beefy meals. So conveniently for you guys, the sponsor of today's show is KC Cattle Company. And guys, I know I've talked a lot about KC Cattle Company. They're an absolutely fantastic company, but there are a lot of meat delivery subscription services out there. A lot of them advertise on other shows that you've probably heard. I'm sure they've got great people that work there and it's all good and go. But only one of these companies is U.S. military veteran owned, U.S. military veteran operated, and all of their beef, chicken, and pork products that they produce are produced here in the good old United States of America, and that is KC Cattle Company, okay? So this company specializes in Wagyu beef. So again, I had never heard of that before I'd never had it before KC Cattle Company, but this is a breed of cattle that is known for its mutations that allow for up to 10 times the amount of intramuscular fat. That's the marbling that gives you all that amazing flavor. And I've told you guys that I think it was last week or the week before, I got my new box from them this month because they do the big box sets. They send it to you in the dry ice and everything. I've got some porterhouse pork chops, I think is what they're called. I'm trying to remember. But guys, I got to be honest with you. I've never made pork chops before. And these are big, fancy, delicious looking pork chops. So I don't want to mess it up. So I wasn't lying the last time when I said, guys, I need your help. So if you are a chef or some sort of a pork chop aficionado, I don't want to mess these up, okay? I want to hit a home run with these pork chops. So please shoot me a DM or an email and let me know the best way to produce these and to put them out there for me and my family to where they're going to love it. So guys, KC Cattle Company sells everything from Wagyu steaks, Wagyu roast, pasture-raised chicken, pasture-raised Berkshire pork, like those pork chops, Wagyu bacon cheeseburger bratwurst, and as I've told you guys about before, the world-famous Wagyu gourmet hot dog. It was named the best hot dog in the world, and I can absolutely attest to that. It is called a tube steak for a reason, because it tastes like a steak, but it looks like a hot dog. It's amazing. You guys have got to try their products. So go to kccattlecompany.com. That's kccattlecompany.com. Use the promo code Kyle to get 15% off your order. Again, that promo code is just my first name, Kyle. That's Kyle for 15% off of your order at kccattlecompany.com. All right, guys, let's get into this interview with Chad Prather. So without further ado, let's get into it. Chad Prather, welcome to Undaunted.Life, a man's podcast.
Brother, it is good to be with you.
Hey, I got to tell you, this isn't nearly as fancy of a meeting as when you had me on your show because you've got this whole big studio. It's fancy. You have servants. You have people like literally bringing you drinks and grapes and crap in between. Like you're literally just forced to sit on your couch in front of a laptop. So I guess we need to start with a big, I'm really, really sorry, Chad. I'm
Yeah,
sorry I'm not as
let
fancy
me
as
tell
you.
you, Kyle, luxury is overrated, buddy. It's just stay right here the way it is. Stay Spartan as possible.
Okay, that's what I'm going to do. I try to do things as relaxed as possible since I'm so intense because I can't make my face look any different. Like I just look this way, I just talk this way. So I have to like try to like soften the edges in other areas. So you've had a really interesting life. You and I have kind of maintained a friendship since coming on your show, and it's really awesome to get to know you a little bit. But you've got a very unique story in that you just, I guess, had a unique upbringing. You've done a lot of stuff. You know, you have a degree from Columbia. You were a pastor. You did international mission work. You've been in the business world. You went to seminary, or I guess you were a professor in seminary for a while, but also you had a unique childhood. So I need you just in a few minutes to bring us up to speed to where you are today. Just tell us all the important information.
Let's see, in a nutshell, I was born in New Jersey. I love to tell people I'm a pro-life guy, and I believe life begins at conception. And I was conceived in Texas, so I at least have Texas DNA.
That's right.
My father was an engineer, and they had him on a project in New York. So I was born in New Jersey, but I only lived there about 4 months of my life, and then they moved to Augusta, Georgia, which was my mother's hometown. My father was a South Carolinian, my mother was a Georgian, and she won out. So uh, grew up in Georgia, then wound up going to, I played baseball and wound up going to the University of Georgia. And from Georgia, as you said, went to Columbia, and Columbia also has a seminary. So I went there as well as did some teaching while I was there as well. And I went into the ministry. I was doing school and doing ministry around the age of 19. It's for the next 12 years of my life, 13 years of my life. I spent a lot of time both working in local churches, both pastoring and leading, but also traveling around the world doing a lot of work in third world countries. I spent a ton of time in West Africa and tons of stories there. But I tell people all the time, Kyle, I was a terrible pastor. I was a great teacher, preacher, but I was a terrible pastor because in American churches, it's people don't really want their problems fixed. They want their problems understood. I believe that if you could take away their problems, a lot of them would lose their identity because they've so, victimized themselves with what's been done to them, or, how they've been so-called oppressed. So I'm one of those guys. I bottom line it for you. I'm not here to pat your bobo, right? I don't have a whole lot of gray areas in that regard. So I was a little too prophetic, if you will, a little too black and white for shepherding local churches. And that's a real thing, man. I'm not one of those counselors, dude, that's gonna make you feel good. But
Hmm.
we, I never, I just kind of because I was struggling trying to fit into a role that wasn't me, kind of putting on Saul's armor. I burned out, wound up losing a marriage, and we had 4 kids. It was a traumatic thing, and I really kind of crawled into a cave of life at that point, and didn't know what I was going to do. And I always knew that I had a gift to communicate, and this thing called social media came along, and I was fascinated with the sociological aspects of it, of how you could reach people and trigger people and make people laugh and make them spend their money and push the buttons and get them to push the buttons. And so for me, I started using social media as a means and an outlet to do all those things, particularly to make people laugh. And a television network wound up. Well, first it was a radio network reached out to me about doing a radio show, and then a television network reached out about doing a travel show with them. One thing led to another, and I wound up going viral on social media with these silly videos sitting in the truck and just kind of talking to my dashboard for a minute or two. And then it got into the world of podcasting, and then wound up at BlazeTV. And so now I don't even really have a podcast. It's a TV show. And, one thing, it just incrementally led to another to get to this point. And a lot of people ask me, they say, why aren't you still in ministry? You should still be in ministry. I said, you have a wrong idea of ministry, because I see what I do as ministry, even now. I just don't have that title, that church title in front of my name. So yeah, it's been a wild journey. I do live shows as a comedian. I do live shows as a musician. I do motivational speaking with organizations that have me in, do the podcasting, do the television show. And so there's a lot of people who, there's two ways of approaching it. People say, man, you really do a lot of things, and that's great. And then there's a lot of people who say, man, you do a lot of things. You maybe should settle that down a little bit and not do so much. So here I am, man. I'm like a goose. I wake up in a new world every day, and I like to do a lot of things. I love variety, and it just kind of defines me.
Well, Chad, it's exciting when you're the business. And like, so when somebody, cause you have to eat what you kill. And so you constantly need to look for these other lines of income and other lines of influence and stuff like that. But I do want to kind of circle back. We talked about this a little bit off air, but we can go ahead and get into it now. Just the overall state of the modern church. So you had me on your show earlier this summer. We did 2 episodes and we talked a lot about that. We talked about manhood, but just specifically within the church, we love to lament as a modern Christian culture that we live in a post-Christian culture. I think a lot of Christians kind of wear that as a badge of honor or a badge of courage, but I think it's healthy to look at that and lament it and to do things to counteract that. But it's also healthy to look at that and be like, we weren't guaranteed to be, prosperous and have no issues. We were basically guaranteed persecution and death and then eternal life. And so just talk to me a little bit about the state of that, because you were in that world. Right. I'm pseudo in that world because I'm not a pastor. I'm not affiliated with any denomination or any particular church building. So I can basically say whatever I want. So this is like a parachurch ministry. And so it's like, and I agree with your sentiment that everyone's a minister in some way, whether you work as a janitor or you work, in a factory or you work in a doctor's office, you're ministering to people every single day just with how you operate and get into them and get into their lives. But just talk to me about the overall state of the church, because I got to say, I'm not terribly enthused with a lot of things I see outside in Christendom. And that's why I make Christians mad and ruffle their feathers a lot, at least here recently.
Yeah, I was in Frankfurt, Germany, in the airport in 1994. And I saw all the advertisements on the wall. How we go through a place, you might see Victoria's Secrets or some magazine, Cosmopolitan, Vogue, something like that, Vanity Fair, and how provocative in 1994 the ads in a public place in Germany were. And I was saying at the time, I said, America usually is about 15 to 20 years behind what Europe's doing culturally. Now that's sped up because you got to remember in 94, that was kind of pre-internet days. Everybody didn't have a cell phone. The cultural information traveled a lot slower. Now that happens a lot faster. The world's gotten smaller. But I can remember saying then, I said, if this can happen in Germany, which was, obviously the place of the Reformation, it was the heart of the Reformation. It was the heart of Protestantism. And I said, just 500 years later, it becomes a place of atrocity. It becomes a place where Nazism takes hold. But then now this lascivious culture is being exposed everywhere in public places. I said, the church is really in trouble if we don't fortify ourselves now in terms of what's coming. So now we see what's happened, and that is we didn't fortify ourselves. We've allowed ourselves to embrace the world's message, and 2 big things have happened, I think, in the church. One is we've embraced commercialism, and we're okay with disenfranchisement. What I mean by that is commercialism, we don't really care so much if unadulterated, offensive truth is being preached in our pulpits, as long as the coffee is the right flavor. The air conditioner is set and the fountains are running in the lobby, and there's a valet to help park your car, and the right children's minister is there to entertain your kids. So we're really no different from a Christian Disney World, and I use the word Christian in quotations. And then the disenfranchisement part is our that individualism, which is inevitable because as Americans we do believe in individuality. But that's not what the church is supposed to be. The church is supposed to be a community. We're not supposed to be unified as much as we're supposed to be one. And that's something that I think has been lost in terms of what the biblical message is for the American church. Is we're not one. We don't have a common message. We're not one with one another. We don't have one heart. Our worship is not. We don't have. When I define that, when I say one, we get from the word one the word integer. And the word integer, we get the word integrity. So if we're not one with ourselves, we don't have integrity in our own heart and community. So we've kind of lost that in a big way. And we hear people talk about revival. We need revival. Well, obviously we're not in any form of a revival. which if you look, the word revival is not in the New Testament at all. It's an Old Testament terminology. It was pre the indwelling of the Holy Spirit. And so, but once the new covenant was made in Christ, the concept is New Testament discipleship. And that is taking the image of Christ that dwells in you and reproducing it in the lives of others. I think that's what we're looking for, but unfortunately, we've lost what we know to be the teachings and the image of Christ in us. Jesus said, "Go and teach the nations everything that I've commanded you, everything that I've commanded you." And we're not doing that. And so consequently, we've lost our mission. And if you lost your mission, then you've lost your purpose. And I always tell people an example. I say, dogs that run in packs, they'll do one of four things at any given time. They'll sleep, they'll eat, they'll fight amongst themselves, and if unthreatened, they'll let new members join the pack. They'll do those four things until a rabbit runs by. When the rabbit runs by, the ones that are eating and sleeping and fighting are going to stop, and they're going to chase the rabbit, and they'll now let new members join the pack as long as they're willing to get caught up in the vortex and the chaos of the rabbit chase. So what are Christians? Christians, or what are churches? Churches are Christians running in packs, right? So we sleep, that is, we get lethargic, we eat, we just go in there and want somebody to feed us all the time, some spiritual truth. We fight amongst ourselves. God knows that happens in the church. And as long as somebody's not willing to mess up the status quo, we'll let new members join us. But we've lost the rabbit, right? We've lost the vision. And that vision, I think, is the Great Commission. And so consequently, the church has become a feel-good habitat. It's become a place of comforting and soothing. And, God forbid we offend anybody or step on anybody's toes. And I say that coming from the perspective of a comedian, because I always tell people that in this age where free speech or just speech in and of itself is under attack, there's two places you should go and expect to get offended. One is the church, and the other is the comedy place, the comedy stage. And we fight against both of those right now because we just want to feel good all the time. So the state of the church, we're in trouble. And I don't know if there's any hope for us apart from a true outpouring of God's, grace and favor and mercy, and that, that evidenced by His Spirit. But I always, God can't save saints, and God can't save seats, and the local church is full of both of them. We're not bringing people in. We're not truly blessing people. We're not ministering to people. That's why I love that what I do, as abrasive as it can be on social media, to me is a ministry. To me, it's a ministry, and it's very offensive to the average modern 21st century mind. But I'm okay with that, right? Because I think we need some abrasiveness.
Well, let's dig into that a little bit more. And I obviously co-sign the abrasiveness. Obviously, people are like, "Kyle, you talk too fast and you're a little bit too aggressive." It's like, well, I can't control either of those things. But, one thing I think you would co-sign, just to make sure everyone's not mishearing you, is obviously you don't think that God's church is in trouble, because God is in control of His church. It's the American church that's in trouble. Maybe you could say the Western church.
Well, and that's the thing. We throw our labels and stuff on the church. When I talk about the bride of Christ, obviously she is being purified for a day, right, that is coming. And we know that bride that Christ loves very much. You go back to the book of Esther, and Esther anointed herself, and they groomed her. I hate to use that word. It's been lost in so many things today, but they bathed her, and they anointed her body, and they put her in baths. I mean, she did this for 12 months before she got married, right? I mean, she was really getting perfumed up. I mean, she went through this beauty regimen for 12 months, if you read the story, before her wedding day. We're going through some pretty cleansing times right now, the whole wheat and chaff. And so we're in a day and age where I think that the bride is being beautified. But man, there's some ugly parts that are there that I think that God loves us so much that He's peeling those layers off. I tell people, and they have to think about this when I say it, but there's some parts of you that aren't going to heaven. Like, there's some of those things that you love about you aren't going to make it, because those aren't the sanctified parts. Those aren't the things that are going to be pleasing to Him. And so He's trying to get those sacred cows out of our lives. and get us to a place where we are pure. So no, the church itself, globally is growing. There is true discipleship happening. There is New Testament Great Commission processes happening around the world. I can remember when I was in Abidjan, Cote d'Ivoire, Ivory Coast, back in, I think it was 96, 95. First time I was there. And I came back and I was telling a seminary friend about some things that I saw while I was there. And they were just like demonic stuff that I saw. And black magic and just some of the stuff that was there. And it was just some real pure evil stuff. And the buddy of mine, seminary friend of mine, he goes, "Yeah, they got that over there, don't they?" And I was like, "Man, they got it everywhere."
Yeah.
I said, "But they're facing I said, "You think it's not in America?" I said, "It's just not being paraded the way it is." I said, "But it's here too. This evil is here too." But see, we've stuck our head in the sand so bad that we don't realize that these forces and powers that are unseen, that are very, very evil and wicked, they're affecting us, man. But we've gotten so sterile in the way that we do things. It's very antiseptic and clinical in the way we do church. And so in that regard, we've become powerless. You don't need power. You don't get power. So that's where we're living.
So you brought up a lot of things that I want to kind of weave together. I want to go back to a point that you were making about the commercialization of the modern church and a lot of those things. So the easy colloquial term for that is the mega church. And I've had some conversation with some pastors that are kind of in that world. And I'm still kind of thinking through the ramifications of that, because it is possible to have a mega church in terms of the definition and be incredibly healthy. And the pastor is not doing TED Talks with a few Bible verses on the back end, but starting with the scripture and maybe a few life lessons here and there. But I guess what I see in the modern church, Chad, and you can tell me if you feel like this is the same way, and this is regardless of if it's a mega church or a small church, even in a rural community. I feel like we are requiring so little of people because we bought into the business ethic of trying to diminish the barriers to entry, I guess you could say. And so I remember Jordan Peterson recently talking about this on a YouTube video when in his message to Christian churches, which is like, require everything. Not only put a big neon sign that says men are welcome here, but require everything of them. Because look, if you really believe the gospel and you believe in repentance and what that actually means, it doesn't mean saying, sorry, God. It means turning away from the life that you were living and the things that you were doing. But most churches, it's like, grab your delicious coffee, grab your cookies, go and see the rock show, listen to your TED Talk, and then bounce. I call it spiritual Skittles. You just get your Skittles and they wear off before you leave the parking lot. There's no life change. There's no discipleship. It's because we're buying into this modern sense of convenience. And we know that if a sermon goes long, that's not convenient because you're going to be, back of the line at the sandwich shop, afterwards or something like that. But go a little deeper into that, because I feel that in my chest. I sense it even in my own church at different points where it's like, we're all here checking this convenience box, but I don't know that we're necessarily going as far as we need to go with the scripture. Go.
Yeah. No, there's a lot there that you just unraveled and laid out there that can be poked at. And I agree with you wholeheartedly. I'm disconcerted with what I see, right? I look at it and I say, maybe we've never known truly what the definition of praise and worship is, right? And so we engage in these things that we've been told are the right thing. There is certain churches that are a little more liturgical. There are churches that are a little more free. What's right? I don't know. I don't know that there is a right. I just think that you have to find the community and the expression of your faith that fits you. And I think that it is a coat of many colors, so to speak, in terms of how we express all these things to God. So if I go to church and I expect 30 minutes of music, if I expect 30 minutes of a message, and then I'm going to, get out of there and go eat chicken and, give the waitress a hard time in the name of the Lord. That what at the end of the day is the right thing that happens on a Saturday night or a Sunday or whichever service you choose to go to. I try not to get caught up in any of those things. I don't need a guy. I don't need a guy necessarily getting on a stage and telling me how to live my life. Now that's handy if he's doing it right. It's handy. It's a tool. It's also a thing which is commanded, but not the way we do it. Right? There is the command to preach the gospel. And I think we don't understand what the gospel is as well. The gospel is not a come and see message. It's a go and tell message. It's a tale of good news. That's literally what the word means. The Apostle Paul defines the gospel as the proclamation of the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. That is the gospel. It is a proclamation that says we win. And you can summarize the gospel in those two words: we win. We don't have a we win message right now. We don't have a we win mission. We don't have a we win method. We don't have any of these things going for us right now. So we get caught up in the weekly practice of the expression of that worship experience. But are we truly discipling anybody? I don't think we are. And when I say disciple, here's what I mean by that. Jesus said, "Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, teaching them everything I've commanded. Lo, I'm with you always unto the end of the age." So he says, "I'm with you to the end of the age." That's Matthew 28:18 through 20. He says, "I'm with you all the way to the end of the age." Why is he going to be with you? He's going to be with you so you can go make disciples. And then, of course, we saw that as evidence in Acts 1, where the Spirit rest, Acts 1 and 2, where the Spirit rested on the church, and then they sent them out, and they went to Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and the uttermost parts of the earth. So Jerusalem, that was their neighbor. They went to I love these little acronyms, or these little mnemonic devices. They went to Jerusalem, which was their neighbor. They went to Judea, which was they went to Jerusalem, which was near. They went to Judea, which was their neighbor. They went to Samaria, which was the neglected, and they went to the ends of the earth, which was next. There's always the next that's out there. And, as they went, he was with them, right? And so when I say that, I mean, I'm got to go and take the Christ that lives in me and pour into someone else. You call it mentorship. You can call it discipleship. You can call it an impartation of your life, a spiritual father, whatever that may be. But I know that if I take a bucket of water and I've got 20 bottles lined up, 15 feet away from me, and I take that bucket of water and throw it at those bottles, there's going to be some drops that get in that bottle. The best method for me, though, is to walk over to each individual bottle and pour from the bucket right into the bottle. That's discipleship. What we're doing in the churches is the first thing. We're throwing the water at everybody. And that's why I think we're so ineffective. And we've gotten so wrapped around the as you said, a business model. We want pastors with an MBA, right? Who are Tony Robbins in a leather jacket, because we got to be cool these days. Preaching jeans and an untucked shirt. And so, we've got these guys out there that are slinging water from the bucket. Some of it's getting in us, but it's not the most effective method. So I think that's why, by and large, just by default, the megachurch method tends to fail. I think it's why this ideology, I'll just go ahead and use that word, the ideology that most pastors and leaders, church leaders, have in their head is they're not successful unless their church gets bigger. They're always looking at, we're going to build this building, and we're going to buy this property, and we're going to expand this, and we're going to do these groups. And it's like, if I don't have this thing that the American church has told me is the blueprint for success in church life, then I'm not doing it right. Well, Jesus died with 12, and one of them was a bad apple, right? So that wasn't a megachurch. That wasn't a megachurch, but it was an okay model. It changed the world because he poured himself into them. How do you think it is that Matthew, Mark, and Luke, you look at the synoptic gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, they all have a retelling in some ways of the teachings of the Sermon on the Mount. So you look at Matthew 6 through 8. How do you think Matthew was able to sit down after Jesus had gone away and sit down and write those things out in the way that he taught them? Well, because Jesus, and if you look at Matthew 6 in the first verse, it says, "And when he was seated," Jesus, we got this image of Jesus giving the Sermon on the Mount, standing up on a rock preaching to the masses. Wasn't doing that. It says, "And when he was seated." The Sermon on the Mount was directed to the 12. He was pouring himself into them. Now, there were others there, and they could hear. They were in the overflow room, so to speak, right? Mama's nursing babies and, whatever. But he was talking to the 12. So there's been some studies on this to say how is it that these disciples, after Jesus was gone, could sit down and consistently, along with each other and independent from each other, write these teachings out and get it so accurate? And the answer is Jesus told them over and over and over and over again. They didn't just say it once and they got it. He had to say that to them at least 100 times for them to be able to grasp it.
It was catechizing before we even knew what that was.
100%. You take my spiritual father. His name's Wade Trimmer. He was a pastor he's been in the ministry for over 50 years. Augusta, Georgia. He was my spiritual father. We traveled around the world together. I served on his staff. If I pick up the phone right now and call him, he's going to answer. We're going to talk. He's still a mentor to me. We did a service in Georgia a couple of years ago. We celebrated his 50th year in ministry, and several of us got up and we sort of eulogized him before he was dead, so to speak, right?
Right.
And so I did a whole thing about the things he says, his little colloquialisms and the way he communicates, because I've heard him over the years so many times, and it got a big laugh because everybody's heard these things for all these years. For so long, he pastored the same church for 35 years, which is unheard of in this day and age. But I can still say the things that he said because I've heard them so many times. That's discipleship. But then not only the sayings, but imparting that spirit into other people. And so for me, that's where we're missing it as the church. We don't have spiritual fathers. There's guys out there who call. You and I have we've had an off the record conversation where you've mentioned a few names to me, and I'm like, yeah, no, I'm not going to interact with that person.
Yeah.
Just because I came out of that world where my ministry was growing. And then when things really got tough, there were those guys that call themselves apostolic, those guys who call themselves fathers, they weren't there. Now, part of that was my fault. I was naive then. I got bitter towards them. But a lot of it was their fault too, because sons get messy. Kids get messy, life gets messy, and a lot of time those guys who call themselves fathers, they want somebody else to clean up that mess. And I bring that up because let me also remind people that the New Testament never calls anybody a daughter of God. We're all sons of God, even if you're a female. Okay, we're all sons of God. The reason we're sons of God is because only the sons are going to get the inheritance. So we have to be sons of God to have authority and to inherit, what God has for us in the kingdom, both here and then, here now and then. So we're sons, and so the pattern is to have spiritual fathers. And you read 1 John where he talks about, or is it 2 John where he talks about. He gives a command. Okay, you fathers do this. You sons do this. You fathers do this. You sons do this. And he's telling the elders to do one thing. He's telling the young in the faith to do something else. And they both have these roles to play. And so we've lost all of that stuff. This idea of fathers imparting to sons. Look, we don't do it in our own families, much less the church in America.
Right.
I think you and I have also talked about this, where we said. America or Western culture is one of the only cultures throughout history that does not have a ceremony whereby we call our sons into manhood, right? Well, we don't do that in the church either. I mean, what's the litmus test on when a person becomes mature in their faith? Do we ever? That's a debate.
You can just make it up.
Do we ever get to a point? That's a debate.
Yeah.
Do we ever truly become? We obviously don't become perfect. We're being perfected according to the New Testament, but do we ever become perfect? Yeah, I know we don't, obviously. I don't adhere to that Nazarene doctrine of sanctification. And there are many who do, and again, that's a debate. It's a healthy debate to have. But I believe we're perfected in the eyes of God because of the blood of Christ, regardless of our faults and sins. But we're growing. But what is that method whereby we look at them and say, okay, it's time for you to be an elder. It's time for you to be an apostle. It's time for you to step into your Ephesians 5 giftings and start doing, or Ephesians 4 giftings and start doing, what it is that God has called you to do. So, and it's hard, dude. It's hard. And I'll say this and I'll shut up. I think you and I had this conversation too about, when we look at leadership in the church, we like to gut shoot our preachers, then shoot them for not having any guts.
Yeah.
That's one of those things. It's hard. It's hard to step out and be a true spiritual father and be a mature believer that can speak things, because people will destroy you for telling the truth. And then and you get into things like losing your job and losing your retirement, losing your health insurance because you were working for the church. So, man, it's a weird thing, dude. We've built a weird house of cards and gotten real far away from the New Testament example.
So a lot there. One thing that you brought up there at the end was, how do we know who elders are going to be and different things like that? Well, when you look at some of these churches that we've talked about, and yes, we've been picking on mega churches, and we should probably be fair. Again, there are unhealthy and then healthy ones, but a lot of the unhealthy ones, Chad, they don't have elder boards. They have boards of directors, because their senior pastor is not a pastor. He's a CEO of a franchise model that constantly needs to be opening up new franchises in order to continue growing the brand and to continue selling books or whatever the thing is. And again, I do want to draw a delineating line, because I do know some people personally. Joby Martin is one. He's I think he went to the University of Georgia. He's a Go Dogs kind of guy. He's got a very, very healthy, enormous church in Florida, in Jacksonville. And so there it can be done, and there are ways to kind of get after that. But I do want to go to something that you meant, or go ahead, Jack.
To me, the only way it can be done, and this is my conviction, the only way it can be done is if that person who leads that large congregation has reproduced himself into other leaders so that they can interact with those smaller groups of people and have that community. And then it's like cells in the body, right? Mm-hmm. So, this organ has all these cells, this organ has all these cells, but it all comes together into one body and the functionality of it. So that's the only qualifier I have there, because I don't want anybody walking away thinking, oh yeah, I can just go out there and preach to 10,000 people every Sunday morning and that's an effective church. And I know that's not what you're saying.
Right. Well, and even beyond that, like you're making the great point, because so I mentioned Joby Martin there. I can't remember if he said this on my show or if he said this in one of our private conversations, but he's like, when someone comes to him and says, hey, I need help, his response is like, do you need me or do you need help? And so he talks about that to where it's just like, look, he's not a great counselor. He's not a great sit between, a marriage on the brink and fix it type guy. So if you need help, he can get you the help. But that's part of the whole discipleship model. But one thing that you said that I thought was really interesting, Chad, is the we win thing. Okay. We don't really approach ministry. We don't really approach sermons. We don't really approach how we do things as a church with a we win mindset. Part of that, if I were to venture a guess, is because that sounds pretty aggressive. Like, we win because if somebody wins, then guess what? There's a loser. And we can't have that, because everyone's got to be on the same page and equity, and everybody gets a trophy in however way you want to couch it. But that goes into a discussion that I wanted to have that is still involved inside the church, but kind of exists outside of it as well. It's the state of manhood overall. Because we kind of live in this culture where it's like we gut shoot our men, and then we shoot our men for not having any guts. Yeah. And so it's one of those deals, especially I always like to talk about it in terms of a sheepdog. People are really, really concerned about the sheepdogs. They don't want the sheepdogs to have guns. They don't want the sheepdogs to show testosterone-filled aggression until something pops off and they're looking around wondering where the sheepdogs are, because they need one now. Right? Yeah. They need a mail order sheepdog, and there's not one available. And with each successive generation, if we keep, feminizing our boys, and we keep telling them that the best parts of how God made them, their virility and their strength and their testosterone and an honorable, courageous life, are toxic inherently, then what do we expect to have as a future, not just, as a community, but as a greater culture of Americans? So talk to me a little bit about that, because I know you've thought a lot about that. So fire away.
Well, I'm pretty passionate on that topic, so I'll try to be selective here. I go back to the we win concept, and I can prove to you this is when I know somebody's about to not get in their pulpit and preach a we win message or we won message. It's really we won, because again, the death, burial, and resurrection of Christ has sealed that. So it's a past tense deal. It's a past and present and future. But when somebody comes out there, here's my practical guide. When somebody comes out there, you see these guys, they want to be cool, they want to be laid back, they want to be comfortable. They come out and they pull a stool out and they sit on the stool and they're going to preach to you That's not a charisma. That in the charisma again, that is that preaching, that is that proclamation word. It's the Greek for that, and that charisma, that proclamation. We won. You'll never see a football coach on a sideline on Saturday or Sunday sitting on a stool. They're not doing that. They're fired up. They're pushing them to win. We won. We're gonna win. We're gonna go out there. We're gonna tear their heads off. You don't preach that message sitting on a stool. Now I'm being a little critical, a little tongue in cheek, but you get the point I'm saying. If you're fired up about a message, you're not gonna sit on a stool and deliver it. Now I'm not saying you can't sit there and give a teaching, but that's not that charisma proclamation of we won. Now, if you're not excited, if you're more excited, and trust me, I am excited about the University of Georgia Bulldogs, the national champs, coming back this season and starting their season this Saturday against Boise State. I'm excited about that. But if I'm more excited about that than I am in being a man and being a man of God and a leader and fighting back against, taking kids to drag shows, in local restaurants, or even pedophilia that's rearing its ugly head and everything from the Catholic Church to the Baptist Church to the Boy Scouts, to these people out there who are changing the phrase pedophile to a minor attracted person in order to sterilize that. If what I'm seeing in the world and culture doesn't fire me up more, then I've got a problem. And if I have that problem, if I'm not enthusiastic about these things that really freaking matter, then how am I going to inspire that next generation and these other men around me, both young and old? How am I going to inspire them to step up and say, it's time for us to be men. It's time for us to take this back. And I appreciate what Jordan Peterson says. You referenced him earlier about how men are absolutely necessary. Men are absolutely necessary. I brought up this point on my show talking with Sarah Gonzalez recently. I said, me personally, I don't think there should be women in the military. Now, that's no disrespect to the women who have served in the military, but would you have? Do you want an army of all women?
Well, Chad, don't lose your train of thought, but I've said that before and people were shocked. I was like, look, I think it's indicative of a sickness in society when we put our women out there to fight our battles for us. But anyway, go ahead.
No, and again, like I said, I mean, no disrespect to the women who have served. I'm thankful for you. I appreciate you. I appreciate what you've done. But do you want an army of all women? I mean, unless we've got some kind of Amazon race out there that I don't know about, I don't think that's what we want. That's mythology. So you say, well, no, I don't want an army of all women, just some women. Well, why do you want some women? If we can't do it with just all women, then why do we do just some women? And it's like, and listen, there's some women out there that can kick my ass, so I tread carefully on this deal, Kyle.
Yeah.
And I say it with all due respect. But what I'm saying is I respect women so much that they shouldn't have to go out there and do that. We should have men who are chomping at the bits. I mean, freaking Spartans who were saying, you're not going to talk to our women like that. You're not going to tread on our land like that. You're not going to take our property like that. You're not going to take our freedoms like that. And it's time to kick that dude in the well, right? So, but we don't have men like that. I laugh about it and say maybe it's the steroids in the chicken. I look at this new generation of skinny jeans, man bun wearing, soy boy, panty waist dudes that are walking around and they literally celebrate. The last time I was on Fox News, I was in New York. I did Fox and Friends in the morning, and they were talking about the rise of the beta male. Man, I said some things on that episode that honestly they didn't like. They didn't like, but it's true because why are we playing nice? Now, I'm not saying we won't always have men that are weaker than us physically. Maybe they're mentally stronger. Everybody has their traits. But it's weird because we're in an epidemic. You want to talk about a true pandemic. We're in an epidemic of weak men. Men who don't want to fight for anything, who don't want to stand up. They're afraid of being embarrassed. They're afraid of being called out. Look how many people go on social media and they hide their faces and they hide their names and they get tough behind a keyboard.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if there's a shortage, if there's a supply chain issue when it comes to Hot Pockets, or mom turned off the AC in the basement. But what are these keyboard warriors doing out there, man? But they're just buzzing around. They're little flies, like flies on crap, and we spend all of our time swatting them off rather than doing the stuff that needs to be done to make society great again and speaking out. So, it starts with guys like you taking a voice and using a platform, and getting other men on board. And again, when I say that, I shouldn't even have to use this disclaimer, but this is not a disrespect or disregard to women, because women have a place, men have a place. You see how culture right now, the attack is on identity, specifically with gender. They want this homogenized human race. Well, that doesn't exist. That does not exist. And in 100 years, they're going to look at America and say, what the heck were they doing?
Yeah.
What were they thinking? I mean, this was idiocracy. And this is why radical Muslims want to kill us. We kill our babies in the womb. Men lie down with other men. You've got women that take the role of men. And I like what comedian Andrew Schwartz said. He said, feminism, they played the long game, right? They when people were out there getting eaten by lions and killing each other in the Coliseum, they weren't about this equality and feminism. But as soon as there was air conditioning in the office buildings, they were like, heck yeah, we want equality.
Right.
So, and they don't understand how society, particularly the government, is playing us, right? They want to make sure, the federal government right now in America, they want to make sure that every home that both parents have to work. They want to make sure of that. And you can't live off of one salary anymore. You can't live off of the husband providing for his home. You can't do that. They want to make sure that they've got at least two people in the home paying taxes, so the government gets more money. And so they're going to make sure that everything is unaffordable. Both families have to go. And so now what do? We farm our kids out to these socialist structures called public education and public schools, and which was designed to be a facilitator and incubator for Marxist thought. And so we put them in the collective community and say, well, I don't have time to homeschool my kids. I don't have the money to homeschool my kids. I don't have the energy to homeschool my kids. That's right, because we have been so defiled by the system to believe that we're just supposed to do it. And so whether it's what's going on, the pattern we've embraced with the church, or the pattern we've embraced with the home, it's disgusting, man. So we're destined to fail. We're literally on borrowed time when it comes to culture and society in terms of when it's going to collapse, because technically it's already collapsed. Men aren't men anymore. They talk about the patriarchy. Let me tell you about the patriarchy. The fact you want to know the offensive patriarchy to me is the fact that a man can dress up like a woman, go out there and objectify a woman by putting on a bunch of makeup, big wigs, and a bunch of dresses, and blow glitter out their ass, and go out there and people celebrate that and throw dollar bills at them, right? That to me, and nobody in the progressive Riri crazy people out there, nobody has a problem with that. Really? The fact that you can give Caitlyn Jenner Woman of the Year and nobody has a problem with that? That is the essence of abuse when it comes to how men objectify women. That's the patriarchy. But yet I speak out to the dignity of in the individuality and the uniqueness of femininity, and people are like, oh, you're a bigot, you're a misogynist, you're a sexist. How dare you point out that a woman, has these? No, I want to take a woman, I want to protect her. Why do you think it is that on average, I got a hair right there, I got to pull that off. On average, men are typically taller than women. You're here, the woman's here. God created that because she fits under your arm. She fits in a protective place. Her head lays against your chest, next to your heart. Just look at it physically. Look at the intimacy of a sexual relation. The way, the design of all of that, it's just physiologically and anatomically, is all about the man protecting the woman, caring for the woman, cherishing the woman, all of these things. But to us these days, we're blasted for having that such a narrow-minded deal. No, I've never met a woman, I mean a true woman, I've never met a woman that didn't want to be protected, nurtured, and taken care of.
Right.
I've never met that. I've seen some people out there that scream in the street and yell. I got stuck, dude. I got stuck in a Me Too rally, the vagina hat deal. And I got stuck in one of those parades one day. I was in Grand Junction, Colorado, and I was eating breakfast, and I came out onto Main Street, and they were having a parade, and I didn't really know what was going on because this was kind of a new movement. And I found myself in one of these vagina hat rallies. And so, me being the way that I am, I just kind of followed along and listened to them and read their posters and asked some questions. And dude, they hated me. They hated me. They didn't know me. They just hated me, right? Because how dare I? Here I am in my jeans and my boots. I got my cowboy hat on, and they hate me just by default and seeing me. I must be one of these, narrow-minded, sexist pigs. But I was literally trying to understand and hear them. And what I heard in their voices, even in their rage, was they're not being protected. They're not being nurtured. They're not being cared for. They've never seen true masculinity. And even when they have, it's like a dog that's been beaten too many times, and you raise your hand to scratch your eyebrow, and the dog cowers back. And that's the way these people are, because we are literally going against God's design for our sexes. And so it starts with men coming back to being men, understanding what our role is, who we are, stop apologizing. That's why, I've got a whole clothing brand. Our shirts and stuff, it's unapologetic. That's what we call ourselves. My business is Unapologetic Ventures. Don't believe in apologizing for who you are. And we got to get away from that. And we've got to stop bowing down to the idols that have been created in front of us.
So obviously 45 minutes in, I'm blowing up the rest of my interview. All the stuff I told you we were going to talk about off air. By this point, that I'm not going to go. No, this is all, no, dude, this is all really, really good stuff. We'll have you back on to talk about news cycle and all that, and put a pin in the drag queen stuff. Cause I want to wrap up with talking about the drag queen stuff. Cause that's something that I've noticed about you is you're a jovial guy. You're a funny guy. You also take things very seriously. There's a certain level of anger that comes out in your voice and in your tone when you talk about that. So put a pin in that. We'll get there. There was something that came out, and I don't have a fully fledged thought here, so I'm going to flow a little bit. And hopefully you can help me a little bit. So in some of the things that you were talking about in terms of men, in terms of manhood, in terms of manhood in the church, you get into this discussion about egalitarianism and complementarianism. Some complementarianism says men and women are equal and they have separate roles. Egalitarians would say men and women are equal and they should all be able to do the exact same stuff regardless of what God's plan is. That's a rough version of those two things.
Right.
What I almost feel like, Chad, I'm literally like chewing on this as I'm going through. It's almost like the modern church and the men therein are wanting to use the complementarian model, but they don't want to partner with their brides or with the bride of Christ. They want to partner with culture. They want to partner with this society that hates them. I just saw this pastor I talked about on my show out of Australia that was saying that we need to lean into the rights of trans people. We need to, make sure we have these other bathrooms that they can go to the bathroom in, and we need to lean into those things. And that's what the loving thing that a Christian would do is. And I've invited this guy to come on my show. His name's Guy Mason. He runs a mega church network down there in Australia. And I want him to explain to me how it is loving to stand by the same people that say, yes, 14-year-old girl, you should cut off your healthy breast tissue. You should have part of your forearm removed and sewed to your crotch in this phallus-like thing. Like, is that the loving thing to do? But I'm called unloving if I say that is a brutal degradation of the imago Dei, of the image of God, of the body of Christ that was given to these people and imputed to them when they were born. So I'm kind of getting off a little bit, but I want to kind of bring it back to that. This guy, like Guy Mason and other people like them, they so desperately want society and culture to love them and to say, oh, pat them on the head. You're so progressive and you're so this and that. Those people hate you. Don't you understand? They will never believe the way that you would believe and should believe. They hate you. Why you're trying to attach your complementarianism to culture that hates you. Anyway, so I'm just kind of flowing at this point, but you go ahead.
Right on that. You're absolutely right on that, Kyle. You step off the reservation and say one wrong thing, they're going to cancel you.
Right. Absolutely. You can't bow low enough.
You have sold your soul and saturated yourself with delusion so bad in order to water everything down to make everybody happy, but you're not going to make everybody happy. You are that armadillo in the middle of the road, man. You're the yellow stripe, and you stand for nothing. Look, at the end of the day, I want to be able to hear God say, well done, good and faithful servant. That's what I want. That's the approval I'm working for. I don't want to be that Matthew 7 guy who shows up and says, man, you built a house, but it was on a bad foundation, or, and it got swept away, or, you say to me, Lord, Lord. And he says, depart from me. I never knew you. I never had an intimacy with you. I would much rather piss some people off here on planet Earth because, the book of Isaiah, I think I won't even start calling chapter and verse because I'll get it wrong. But the book of Isaiah, one of my favorite passages there is he says, what is man but the breath that's in his nostrils? So if that's all we are, why are we working to please these people? Why are we doing that? There's a church down in Katy, Texas. We're organizing right now because on the 24th of September, this church, First Christian Church of Katy, and if you go to their Facebook page, it's appalling. They're going to have a family-friendly drag show. Now, help me understand this, Kyle. They're going to do a family-friendly drag show from like 5 to 7, and then after 7, it goes to 18 and up. Tell me what's going to change at 7 o'clock.
Absolutely
What are you
nothing.
going to do? What are you going to do from 5 to 7 for the kids? What are you going to do after 7 o'clock? What level of perversion are you going to start doing so that the kids aren't welcome anymore? So, we've already got about 500 people organized that are going to be there for that in protest. And look, I'm at a point now where, I said, I put on Twitter yesterday, I said, there's absolutely no reason to take a child to a drag show. And I don't want to keep harping on this, but we use it as an example. And there's not. And they say, well, there's no reason to take a child to church. Well, we've got to root out the evils that are in the church. It's still up to the parent to make sure they're taking their kid into a healthy environment, whether it's the church or the drag show. You wouldn't take them into a strip club. You wouldn't take them into a cockfight in the back alleys of Thailand. You wouldn't do any of that stuff. So, I look at this stuff and I say, you talk about the love thing. And I say, look, I love everybody. I really do. People don't believe it. Some people are real hard to love, but I want what's best for people. I really do. And when I see you going off that cliff, I want to tell you, I want to warn you, just like I hope somebody, Kyle, you're my friend. And I would always hope that if you saw me running off a cliff somewhere, you'd be like, hey dude, hit the brakes, man. Because that's what friends do. And so, I've got gay and lesbian friends. Some I work with, some I'm associated with business, but I'm in intimate relationship with them, and I can look at them and I can say, that's going to be destructive for you, right? What you're doing right now is going to lead to. Now that I can have that conversation, I can say it to them tongue in cheek. I can look at them dead in the face, tell them I love them, and tell them the truth. I can do those things. Now, what people want me to do is condemn them. People want me to come at them in fire and brimstone and rain down Sodom and Gomorrah on them. And I just say, no, I just don't think that's the most effective way. I can speak the truth in love with the purpose of character change. Speak the truth in love with the purpose of character change. That is the key right there. But the love is the key part. Otherwise, as 1 Corinthians 13, of course, says, you're like a clanging cymbal. I speak with the tongues of men and angels. It doesn't matter what I say, but if I don't have love, I'm nothing more than a clanging cymbal. So, these people that I speak to, they know that I love them. They know that I love them. They know that I care about them. And I can come to them and I can speak those things into their lives and try to do it with a gentleness and turn them a little bit. And I think we've got to do that because this today more than ever, we really have to have an iron fist, but we've got to cover it with a velvet glove because people are really tormented. The powers and principalities, those things that are unseen, those spirits that are at work among us that we can't see and often disregard, have really ratcheted up the heat, right? And so people are more deceived than ever. Maybe not more than ever, but we're in an age of deceit. And we've seen it throughout history where it's gotten really bad. But we're in an age of deceit, and you wonder how can Nazi Germany exterminate 6.5 million Jews? That's an age of deceit, right? How can Cambodians kill the millions that they did in the killing fields, and the extermination of Russians under Stalin? How can that happen? Well, it's an age of deceit. And if you don't think the violence is going to follow what's happening right now, trust me, it's coming. You look at Joe Biden right now calling us MAGA Republicans. If you're a conservative at all, you didn't vote for him, you're a MAGA Republican. And you notice that's the talking point right now. It's in all the tweets, it's in all the press conferences. His press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre, just doubled down on it again the other day when pointed out and asked about it, because they're trying to label conservatives. They want to label people like me and say, well, he's one of those MAGA Republicans. Well, if they can attach that label, they can categorize and classify me and put me in the box and ultimately do with me what they will, what they want to do, because I'm not human anymore. I'm a MAGA Republican. Right. That's what they did with the Christians. I mean, in the first century, Christians, to call someone a Christian was not necessarily a good term.
Yeah, it was an insult.
It was an insult. It was a derogatory. Whenever the word, I'll tell you a funny little etymology lesson here. The word enthusiasm comes from the Greek entheos, which means God inside of you. The first century Christians were so passionate and so excitable that they said God's in them. They're enthusiastic. They're entheos. We get enthusiasm from that. That was not a complimentary term. They were saying they were possessed. They were almost like whirling dervishes, if you will, getting themselves frenzied up in their acts of worship. And so they were comparing them basically to the pagan religions of the day. So, they can label you and put that derogatory term on you, then they can control the narrative about how your life's going to go here, in the future. So we're in an age of deceit, man. And so that's why I say we've got to speak the truth in love for the purpose of character change. It's going to take an iron fist, and it's going to take, I tell you, it's going to take some real critical thinking. And when I say critical thinking, here's the way I like to, here's how I define critical thinking for me. I always say, am I wrong? If I say something or I think something, I start with, am I wrong? And then I start to dissect what I'm thinking and feeling and saying. And I go, I want to know if I'm wrong. That's it. And I want to dissect this. And when I get to the conclusion of it, if I still feel convicted that this is truth and this lines up, then I'm going to go forward with it. And I'm going to go forward, just blazing forward with the thing. Because to me, I've critically thought through the deal, and it's a conviction that it's truth, and I'm going to embrace it. And we've lost critical thinking. Thinking is uncomfortable. That's hard work. I mean, you're an exercise guy. You told me yourself that you always want to do a little more. You want to do a little more. You look back on it, you're like, I could have done more. I could have done this. And you do that in terms of the physical. You do that in terms of the mental. See, that's what we've got to do with our minds. When we talk about discipleship, we're talking about our mind, will, and emotions. That is your soul. When God created Adam, he breathed into him breath, and the kaye nefesh in the Hebrew, he became a life soul. That nefesh is your suke, your psyche in the New Testament Greek. That's your mind, will, and emotions, right? So you look at the book of Proverbs, as a man thinks in his heart, so is he. That word heart, that's nefesh. As a man thinks in his soul, so is he. The word the word thinks is kaye, which is the Hebrew for a gatekeeper. And so what a man opens the gate to into his soul is what he becomes. So you look at certain things, you embrace certain things, you believe certain things, you're exposed to certain things. As a man thinks in his heart, so is he. As a man gives access to his soul is what he becomes. That's mind, will, and emotions. If we're not discipling those three things, your mind, your volition, your ability to make a choice, and your emotions, if you're not discipling those three things, go on social media and look how wild the emotions are. Everything is in their feels, man, because we're not critically thinking. We don't have that anymore. So those are the things that I encourage the people that I have influence over. That's the stuff you got to get control of.
I mean, we talk about all the time on the show, cultivating spiritual, mental, and physical resilience. And part of that entire thing is what you're talking about. It's this intellectual honesty. And it's just this, put your pride down for a second. You said the wrong thing. You thought it was true. It wasn't. Just correct the record. It's really not that big a deal. Like this idea that, okay, doubling down somehow makes you more virtuous. No, it makes you twice as stupid. So, dude, there's so many more things that we could get into here, but I know you got to go to the studio and make some things happen today. We will certainly have you back on to talk about political stuff and the fact that you ran for governor of Texas and all that other that. But we'll save that. We'll save that for the audience down the road. But that's all for me. Is there anything else you want to get off your chest?
No, brother, I appreciate you. And hey, if folks want to, I don't always preach at people. If they want to come have some fun with some laughs and some music and and some good stuff. Check out my schedule at watchchad.com. And of course, folks can subscribe to the Chad Prather Show on BlazeTV, or it's get it at Chad Prather on YouTube.
All right, guys, that is all in the show notes. Chad Prather, thank you for coming on Undaunted.Life, a man's podcast.
Thanks, brother.
There you go, guys. I hope you enjoyed my time with Chad Prather, but before we let you go, we are going to do a quick resilience boost. At Undaunted Life, our mission is equipping men to push back darkness with content that forges spiritual, mental, and physical resilience. And guys, don't forget to support the sponsor of today's show, KC Cattle Company. Go to kccattlecompany.com. That's kccattlecompany.com. Use the promo code Kyle to get 15% off your order. Again, the promo code is just my first name, Kyle. That's Kyle for 15% off your order at kccattlecompany.com. So the links I've got for you today, I've got a link to Chad's website. That's watchchad.com. A link to his show, a link to his Twitter, and his book that we didn't really get to talk about at all today. It's a book on Amazon that you can check out called Am I Crazy? All right, guys, thanks so much for listening to the show. We do appreciate it. Wherever you're listening to this, please subscribe, rate, and leave us a positive 5-star review. If you want me to come speak live at your event or on your podcast, just shoot me an email to info@undaunted.life. That's info@undaunted.life. Follow us on Instagram and like us on Facebook, and check out our website for everything else, including how to donate to keep more content like this coming your way. Just go to www.undaunted.life. And as always, we want to thank the band August Burns Red for allowing us to use their music for our content. The music on this podcast is their song Cutting the Ties, which is off their 10th anniversary re-recording of their album Leveler. The links are in the description. I'm your host, Kyle Thompson. Remember, keep pushing back darkness, keep forging spiritual, mental, and physical resilience. Keep seeking the Lion of Judah.